Can everyone over Zoom hear us in here? Yes, Deshay, can you speak so we can see if they can catch you? Good morning. Did that work? Did you hear Deshay? Okay,
We did.
perfect. We can hear you all as well.
Yes.
There it goes. I got it. I figured it out. You hear yourself, you're like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was-
I did too. Okay, so I muted the feedback, so they should be able to hear us, and then when they need to speak, I'll be able to unmute that. I did. We ready? Okay. Oh, God. Yes. Okay, sorry. I'm normally here, we are live now. Welcome, everybody. This is our first in-person meeting since, I guess, 2019. Right? It's been a while. It's nice to see people in person. I know we have a few people via Zoom. Just a couple of reminders, if you're on Zoom, make sure you leave your camera on. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. We'll get to those questions. Make sure you're introducing yourself if you can. We're going to do roll call here in a minute. And then again, welcome to everyone for our first in-person Financial Aid Advisory Committee meeting June 2nd. So let's go ahead and do the roll call. We'll get that taken care of. Denise, I know is not here. She's on here. Victoria? Here. Bridget? Here. Holly? Nolan? Shauna Norton?
Here.
Thomas
Here.
Ratliff?
Yep.
Joseph?
Which one?
Joseph Ruiz.
Here.
Thank you. Joseph Sanchez. Dee Dee. Rachel Joseph, she's our student. We don't expect her. She logged in via Zoom. Julie. Jamie. She logged in. Rachel. Jackie Adler. Cecilia Jones.
Here.
Sal is out. He sent us an email. Sal Ramirez. Tavian here. Make sure I got that right. Gilbert Zavala is on Zoom. He's here. He's on Zoom.
I am on. It looks like my camera is malfunctioning though.
It's also out today. He is not here. Scott.
Here.
Gabby Leon. Lisa Schober.
Here.
Linda McKendry. And Deshay. And Deshay. Present. Okay. So our second agenda topic is consideration approval of minutes for our March 2nd meeting. Hoping everybody had a chance to look through those and make sure there were, if you have any questions or changes or anything that you wanted to talk about or correct or any of that. If we don't have any updates or changes or corrections, we're going to, if those are approved.
Hey, Jamie, this is Gilbert. I just wanted to confirm that I'm on. My camera is malfunctioning, so I didn't know if you heard me when I said that.
Financial Aid Advisory Committee business.
We can't hear you either.
There was no prior FAAC business launch.
All right. Agenda number 4, John Wyatt with our external relations. Is he?
He's not online yet, no.
Oh, I didn't see him. Sorry. Okay, so let's move on to agenda topic 5. And we're going to have Charles Contreras, Assistant Commissioner, to present on the financial aid strategic priority. So sorry, I didn't see.
You're somewhere I'm supposed to sit.
If you wanted to go sit back there by
Back there?
Deshay, yes.
Great.
You want to have your slideshow up.
Oh, oh, I'm so proud of you.
Get some nap. And Jamie, do I just tell you next slide when?
Yes, let me get it sharing on the Zoom. Okay, that should be up for everyone. So whenever you are ready.
Okay. So wanted to bring everyone up to date on the work that we've been doing with the Expand Access strategic priority at the agency. I've talked to you before about this. And the agency has set out optimizing financial aid to remove barriers to student enrollment and improve affordability and enhance value as one of 5 key strategic priorities at the agency. And I previously asked for some input from you all. Did a survey and the like, and wanted to kind of tell you where we stand in relation to this. Next slide. So this next slide kind of puts in perspective where the Expand Access strategy fits within the work that's being done with higher education across the state. There's both Building a Talent Strong Texas, which is the state's strategic higher education plan. And then there's the Tri-Agency Initiative, where the Higher Education Coordinating Board, the Texas Education Agency, and the Texas Workforce Commission are working together to help move things forward in terms of education and workforce throughout the state. And the Expand Access priority supports a significant number of the different aspects, the different metrics that we're looking to influence within the higher education programs. So it weighs in and helps with the attainment of post-secondary credentials, post-secondary credentials of value, even the research, development, and innovation. As we look at working to increase the number of research doctorates that are awarded. On the tri-agency side, it most specifically focuses on support, ensuring that students and families have the supports that they need to reduce the financial barriers in education. So this one strategy influences many pieces of the puzzle. Next slide. This just kind of gives you a picture of the things that we did. So we did surveys, we did brainstorming, we looked over prior research reports, we interviewed people, really tried to pull in a wide variety of stakeholders. You all were part of that discussion. We looked to the tri-agency group, who looked at all the assistant commissioners across the agency to really work on identifying what are the different levers that we can influence in the work that we do. Where can we do our best to make an impact? And this kind of pulls things together to help guide us forward. Next slide. I also, when I talk about this, I always try to take a moment to center this whole discussion on how this ties directly to what the legislature is expecting of us as a state. The legislature in the Declaration of Policy, when they created the Student Financial Aid Program section of the Education Code, speaks directly to the importance of removing those financial barriers to educational goals. And that is a key of what we do in financial aid, is removing those financial barriers. So this ties to, the legislature's intent. This ties to the governor's intent through the tri-agency initiative. This ties to the higher education strategic plan for the whole state. So this work really ties into so many different places where our elected officials and our agencies, et cetera, have all kind of put a stake in the ground to say, this is critical. This is important work that we must do. Next slide. This is something that you saw a version of previously, and we continue to refine this to try to make sure that we know what is and what isn't in scope when we talk about the work that we're doing, because this could easily become something where we're just trying to do everything. And when you try to do everything, phrases boil the ocean, you don't get much of anything accomplished. And so really trying to focus in on, in scope are the resources that assist individuals in meeting the holistic costs related to post-secondary education. They go to the individual. They require some kind of effort on part of the individual. It might be gift aid, it might be self-help, but it's money that we're targeting to those students to help remove their specific financial barriers. We identified that we needed to clarify what's out of scope on this, because there were pieces that like, well, that helps and that helps and that helps. But when in the work that we're doing, we're focusing on the things that are targeted at the individual student, rather than the things that are more focused on just overall reduction in costs. That's more kind of financing strategy as to how higher education as a whole is covered. So, if there's changes in formula funding that allow institutions to make changes to their tuition rates, that's a broad piece that affects all students. Or even something like open educational resources that allow the cost of textbooks to go down for everyone enrolled in a course. That's more on the idea of how higher education is financed, rather than how an individual student's financial barriers are overcome. And so for this particular work, it's not that these things aren't important, but for the expand access strategy focused on how to optimize financial aid to remove barriers, those items are considered out of scope, those items that relate to the overall financing of higher education. Next slide. So when I talk at the agency, and I've talked to lots of people at the agency as this has continued to grow, one of the things I've said is that if I could get everyone at the coordinating board to know this slide and to understand this slide, to be able to identify, kind of how their work ties in to this slide. Like to me, that would be an achievement. Like I want everyone at the agency to be able to kind of look at this and go, oh, that's where I fit into the puzzle. Even though I'm not part of student financial aid programs, the work that I do impacts this. And so through all of the feedback that you all provided and then looking at and talking to people throughout the agency and other agencies, we came up with this ecosystem of all the different levers that go into affecting a student's experience in relation to financial aid. And I think the most important piece on this slide to me is on the far right side, that the beneficiary of aid is the student. Like ultimately, everything drives to that point. There's lots of people involved in the process. Families are involved, the state and federal government's involved, there's donors that are involved, there's all the educational institutions. So there's thousands upon thousands of people that are involved, but ultimately it drives to the beneficiary of aid being the students. And I think you've heard me mention before that we very specifically talk about resources that assist individuals in meeting the holistic costs related to post-secondary education. We consciously didn't use the phrase cost of attendance. That is a federal term. That is a very specifically defined federal term. It's even more specifically defined based on the FAFSA Simplification Act. And we want to acknowledge that this is our state policy. This is our state strategic plan. We're not bound by the specifics of federal financial aid solely. Clearly, you all have to meet the expectations of federal financial aid. But when we're thinking about what we're trying to achieve as a state, we want to be thinking about how do we support our students. I think the example I use constantly to try to put this in perspective is the whole challenge of emergency aid. The aid that goes to support those things that just don't fit nicely in the federal's definition of cost of attendance. We know how critical those are. And for us to pretend that if you meet the cost of attendance, then everything's fine and a student will never have a problem, that it works for how the federal government needs to administer its aid programs so that you can do the math and that you can meet the compliance, but it doesn't necessarily work when thinking about the beneficiary of aid and thinking about how do we remove the barriers for these students. So we're very conscious about trying to meet those holistic costs and thinking about how can we do different things in different ways. There may be pieces of the puzzle that really just kind of slide into the federal definitions. There may be pieces of the puzzle that we really think about in different ways. So we are not attempting to say that this slide captures every minute detail that has to happen within the financial aid world. This isn't meant to be that. This isn't meant to be like just show this slide to a new financial aid counselor and they know how to do their job. This is meant to be from a strategic standpoint. How do we think about the different ways that we can influence the whole financial aid ecosystem? What are the different places we might think about? And even though there are items that, we've got communication with a big arrow towards outreach and awareness, it's not that that's the only thing communication influences. Communication influences all the pieces of the puzzle, but we know it has a really big impact on awareness and outreach. Funding has a really big impact on disbursement. You gotta get the money out to people. But then, with technology and policy, you can't do what you need to do without technology across every step. And actually, figured out, I think it's August 21st, I'm not positive the exact date, but August 21st is when I hit my 30-year mark in financial aid. And I think about what technology was 30 years ago, and I think about what technology is today. We have to be thinking about that. We have to be thinking about the policies. How can we set up policies that support this ecosystem? So I share that to kind of give this picture that this is a piece that will be constantly driving our thinking about financial aid. Again, it doesn't capture every minute detail, but it's what drives our thinking of, okay, we're going to do this particular idea. What lever is it going to push to help us achieve that beneficiary of aid as the student? Next slide. So that's the background. Some of you have heard, pieces of that. It's changed. When we first put it together, and then when we got all your input, we're like, wow, we're missing pieces along the puzzle here. And so it really helped us flesh out this idea. And then we've taken all of that input and we've started to put together a strategic plan. And the strategic plan is definitely still forming. I would say kind of the slides that I've presented to you just now, like those are the slides we've kind of locked in. That financial aid ecosystem is going to be how we think about these things. What I'm about to present to you is the initial pieces that we've done to try to think about how do we bring this into an overall concept, and how do we kind of make decisions about the things as an agency that we're going to attempt to do to help support. You've heard the commissioner say, you've heard me say, that the strategic or the higher education coordinating board, we are a partner, a resource, and advocate for institutions of higher education and the students that they support. And so what are the things that we can do that help us be a partner, a resource, and an advocate? Next slide. And so this starts to take this and put it into a strategic plan. And so we start with Talent Strong Texas. That is the statewide higher education strategic plan. And it's driving, the ultimate goal of that is to equitably foster the skills and spur the innovation vital to the Texas economy. So clearly a very broad goal. Need to break that down into some pieces to get to those things. And with Talent Strong Texas, it's got those three key things about attainment of post-secondary credentials, focusing on post-secondary credentials value, and focusing on research, development, and innovation. Then within the agency, we've got our 5 key priorities, strategic priorities. Educate purpose, clear the path, expand access, which is about financial aid, support success, and build a vibrant Texas future. So we're focused in on expand access. And from everything that we heard from people, we distilled it down to 3 core areas that we want to focus on. One being policy, one being advising, and one being technology. And within this, one of the things that I've acknowledged very much within the organization is that this isn't something that the Division of Student Financial Aid programs can accomplish on their own. We have to look at across the agency, how does our college and career advising unit play into this? Our student success unit, our communications unit, our external relations unit, all these different pieces play into this. While student financial aid programs may be kind of the champion and the driving force of this, there are lots of pieces that come into play. And a key example I'd use is advising. One of the things that we've really shifted, or we're in the process of shifting, is how we think of advising as an agency. When it came to financial aid and getting information about financial aid, Historically, we really thought of it as the Student Financial Aid Programs Division needed to get information out there, needed to get information up on College for All Texans, needed to, be the one who does financial aid. And what we've realized is student financial aid programs is a great subject matter expertise center. That was a weird way of saying that. I'm just trying to say it as I said it, but we've got tons of subject matter expertise. Ask me something about our financial aid programs in the state, I can probably spit out something that explains it. It will also sound like someone who went and got their doctorate in higher education management and wrote a dissertation and typed up his thoughts on this. And it will be way too detailed for your students. They will fall asleep reading my description of this. We've got a whole communications division. That's what they do, is they figure out how to put this stuff in plain English and the like. We've got a whole career and college advising division that what they do is create this suite of advising tools between My Texas Future and OnCourse and other pieces to try to get the information out there. And so looking to bring all of our expertise together to figure out how do the subject matter experts, the communication experts, the advising tool experts bring it together in a way that's most impactful, rather than student financial aid programs trying to operate as an island. If it's financial aid, breaking down this idea in the agency that it's like, it's financial aid, that's what Chad and Deshay do. Give it to them. That's what they do. And really thinking about it as that's what we as an agency do, and how do we each contribute. So, but those are the areas we're really thinking about. Policy, how can we create, structures and strategies that really drive aid to where it's needed. Advising, how do we make sure that people have the information they need to utilize these opportunities? Technology, how do we, harness the technology that exists to push these concepts forward and to support you all in the work that you do. And so we've set out some work streams from aimed around it. On the next, and I'm gonna pause for a second, sorry. Jamie's like, no, don't do that yet. This piece of the puzzle, like this slide, is another slide that's pretty locked in at this point. This is pretty much how we're thinking about it. So far, the financial aid ecosystem slide, this plan overview slide, these are how we're thinking about this strategy. Now the next slide starts to show you the kinds of things that we're thinking about. And so the items in green, those are the items that, they're already on the roadmap. We are already doing this work. We're at various levels of doing this work. The yellow represents items that we very specifically want to accomplish in advance of the 89th legislative session to help impact and influence that session. We had a great legislative session this year when it comes to higher education and financial aid. We want to continue to build on that. We don't want this to be a one-time thing. We want to continue to make our case. And then the blue represents specific ideas that have come up that we believe can influence those levers that we want to look at. How do we achieve these? Now, a piece that's missing here, because we didn't have it basically until 2 days ago, is what was the outcome of the 88th legislative session? So one of the things that we need to do now is take this slide and put in all the new things that we're gonna need to do? What are all the programs that changed? What are all the new programs that existed? What needs to happen to support those things? So that we can map out, what are the resources we have, et cetera. Because that influences our ability to tackle these other projects. And I'll be honest, if, like, say we had a legislative session that we got like one new aid program, we could tackle more of these new projects this year than a legislative session where they're like, we changed 9 of your programs and we added 5 new programs and we want them all to start by September. Or changes the resources during the summer. So some of this is resource planning as well. And one of the things that I don't think I included, no, I didn't include it in your handout. One of the things that we'll be doing is we'll be sending out some survey information to all of you to get your input on which of these do you think are most critical. And another way to think about it is, which of these do you think would be most impactful? Because we know we can't achieve all of them. And so want to focus our attention on the ones that we think are going to be most influential in the process. So over the course of June, you'll get a couple of emails asking you to look at different concepts and to give us feedback to help us start prioritizing the work. One of the other things that we're doing is with this focus, now that we have a strategic plan that we're working towards, now that we have identified these different initiatives, these different strategies that we're trying to achieve, we're also working within student financial aid programs to organize around the idea of pushing these forward. So not necessarily organizing around these different strategies, but to organize on how do we best drive things forward. So one of the things that we've done that I'm very pleased to announce is that Deshae Reed has been promoted to Director 3 within the organization. And she is going to be overseeing our operation strategies. So she's going to be thinking about, okay, these things exist. How do we make them work? How do we, with all these programs that you need to do with our loan programs, with our grant program, our work study programs, we've got technology, we've got human resources, financial resources. What's the best way to make the day-to-day operations click for all of you? What's the way that it is most impactful for you all as institutions, that you all that can be most impactful for the students? Are there barriers we can break down to the way we handle those day-to-day operations? And so our big old loan program has moved under Deshae, and she is working with all of that day-to-day operational strategy. You may also have seen that we posted a deputy assistant commissioner position. So that got posted 2 weeks ago, last week it got posted. It closes on Monday. And the deputy assistant commissioner, that role is going to be focused on 3 key areas within our organization. One is the piece related to business improvement. So we want to do new things. We want to make things better. How do we get that to actually happen? Deshae identifies, we really got to break down this barrier, this roadblock to our operations. Okay, folks, get on it and figure out how to break that down for folks. So the business improvement area and our project management, our compliance area. So internally, how do we make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and that I call it a cycle. I do that here. I'm like, why is he doing this in front of it? Because I view it as this continuous cycle of we're checking our work, we're doing our quality control, we're learning what's not working, and then we train people. We come up with ways to make sure that people understand it, and we train them. And then we check to make sure that we're doing it better. And then that influences the next round of training. So it's this big circle to get better. And then our data management and reporting. So everything we do, I was in the corner reading our annual financial aid reports that our data management analysis area put together. So using all that FAD data that you send us to turn it into information that's useful for legislatures, etc. So really taking these policy ideas, these advising ideas, these technology ideas, and figuring out what is it that SFAP needs to do. And then we're about to post, literally just sent it last night, I think, so hopefully it'll post next week, a senior policy director who's going to oversee kind of how do these things translate in terms of the rules that are needed, understanding the statutes that are out there. How do we, create things in a way that they have that influence they need to? And I'm also very pleased to announce that Leah Smalley has recently been promoted to our first policy director, which one of her major pieces is taking all these statutes and turning them into rules that are effective for you all, and that achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And things that we haven't really had time to do, thinking about federal financial aid and what's the connection between federal and state, and what do we need to know. We will never be the experts you should call on federal financial aid. That's not our role. That is the federal government. We are not going to usurp their role of defining, but we do need to understand how they play together, and how do we best have that play together. And so that's an area. Another area that is an agency I've joked for the whole 8 years that I've been here is that nobody's owned tuition at the agency. Like everyone's like not it when it comes to tuition. And they're like, people will say to me, we don't do tuition. I'm like, well, then why do we have all these rules about like collecting tuition and when it's due and everything? And they're like, oh, okay, that's right. And so after 8 years, I finally said to my boss, look, as long as you give me another person, we will take tuition. And so even though tuition is about more than student financial aid programs, it needed a home. I'm a glutton for punishment. And so we are taking on tuition to try to get that into our strategy and be thinking about those things. So we're doing some very specific activities to expand and grow the student financial aid program staff so that we can have the resources. One of the things my boss said to me was, we've got this plan, now we need to get you the resources so that you can execute on this plan. And so we are working on growing our team accordingly. And so I think that's the big picture of where we stand on this. I wanted to be able to present it to you so you could hear about it, so that when we send out these surveys and the like, it's already familiar to you, and you can focus in on, okay, what do you think are the most critical pieces of the puzzle? So, happy to answer any questions that you might have about.
I do have 2 questions from the Zoom chat.
Great.
So let me. Okay, so Gilbert asked, his first question was, does TEOG expansion mean added coverage for eligible students or expanded coverage for students not currently covered by the program? For example, students enrolling in workforce programs leading to credentials of value.
Yes. So TEOG expansion is actually about a number of things. Part of it is about working with community colleges to help you absorb this historic expansion of funding for the TEOG program. The TEOG program, the funding went up monumentally in terms of, how much is going to be going out to individual institutions. And your allocations will reflect that once the governor actually signs the bill. Wanting to make sure that folks understand how they can use this funding. We have institutions that send us money back every year. There's millions of dollars left unused every year. When we look at the financial aid database, our numbers are showing that only like, under the previous amount, only like 20 to 25% of eligible students were getting TEOG. Yet we have institutions telling us that they can't find people that are eligible for the program. So we want to work with community colleges to help make sure, does everyone understand exactly who's eligible for this? Is anyone like kind of taking some federal ideas and applying it to state ideas? And for us to be able to say, wait a second, those don't connect, two separate programs here. Like one time I heard someone say that you can't give TEOG if someone's tuition was already covered. And I'm like, no, it's not a direct link between these. The amount you give is tied in statute to how we calculate, but they're not directly tied together. So one piece of expansion is, how do we help two-year institutions utilize this additional, I think it's something like $75 million a year that's being poured into the program. Another piece of expansion is thinking about, within the statute as it stands, are there ways for us to interpret the statute that would expand who's eligible for the program? Are there ways to expand more broadly into certificates than we currently look at? Are there ways to expand into things that really drive the idea of post-secondary credentials of value? So things that fall squarely in post-secondary credentials of value, but don't necessarily currently fall squarely in TEOG eligibility. So looking at those kind of pieces of the puzzle. So we want to do both of those things. We want to help make sure that two-year institutions across the state truly understand how they can use this funding. And we want to look at, are there ways to expand the number of students that would be eligible for these programs?
And the other question also from Gilbert was, where does My Texas Future platform fit into the strategic initiatives covered?
Yep, and My Texas Future is solidly in the advising strategy. And really, as an agency, we are driving towards the idea of getting away from having like 18 different sites that talk about higher education in different ways, and really trying to drive towards the idea that My Texas Future is where you go if you are interested in going to college. You're interested in pursuing post-secondary and higher education. So it's for students, prospective students, their families. That is the product that really we are focusing on. How do we bring, how do we decommission College for All Texans and get it into My Texas Future? How do we decommission Gentex, get it into My Texas Future? How do we decommission these different things so that kind of right now, you need to know the question you're trying to answer to figure out where you might go to get the answer to that. We want to get to a point where you don't have to know your question. You just need to know you want information about higher education. And you go to My Texas Future and you get that. OnCourse is really driven towards educators. So, and for P16, in terms of educators, really growing that out, that's the place where individuals who work at elementary, middle, high school, institutions of higher education, that those people go information about higher education. So we're looking at ways as to how to drive things into that platform. And have that be the place of, I have a question, go to OnCourse, and I'm gonna be able to find information about that. And so you may see some changes in even where we put some of the information right now as to where you go to find your program guidelines or things like that, and try to drive that all into one place. Not gonna happen overnight. There's a lot of stuff out there that we're trying to figure out how to distill it into ways that are most understandable. But ultimately, that's our goal, is that My Texas Future will be there to answer questions for people who want to pursue higher education. OnCourse will be there for people who work in education and need information, whether they're a counselor, whether they're a teacher, whether they're a financial aid administrator, whoever they are, they'll be able to go there. Any other questions?
I have a question regarding the drug conviction requirement for DOJ. I know one of the biggest issues that community colleges have is getting a human to fill out the additional paperwork, and I think we do have eligible students, and we do award them, and we try to spend every dime. But to get someone to fill out just one more document, I mean, other than knocking on their door, I guess we could go to that if we had to, but it's just crazy. So I guess the question is there any talk of, or is there any discussion of removing that requirement, or is it still pretty much?
That one is still in statute, and that's a place where I always have to be very transparent as to what we can and can't change. Like there's what we can try to influence, there's what we can change, and those pieces that are like in statute, like those things, gotta get the elected officials to change that. The selective service requirements in statute. It would be the shortest bill imaginable, because all it would have to say is repeal 51.9098. I think that's the number. You know, that would be the entire bill, but you know, that's where selective service is. Those kind of things are definitely part of one of the initiatives that we have out there for the next legislative session, is to try to pull together kind of all these disparities between federal and state and see what we can do in order to try to bring these to the forefront, not just from a standpoint of, hey, here's the difference, but here's the impact of that difference. So try to put that human spin on it, so that they understand, so that everyone, you know, as we look at these things, that they're not just things like, hey, that would be helpful, but you know, here is the impact. Those kind of discrepancies, I would say, like the ones I constantly rattle off are selective service, the drug and felony, and satisfactory academic progress. You know, there's where you have your three blaring differences between federal and state. So those unfortunately are in statutes, and aren't able to influence as much. Like one item that's on the agenda for later today is a place we can influence, and that's the financial aid priority deadline. Because the statute just says you gotta do this, but then we're able to use our rules to figure out the best way to do that. So very much aware of it. The one big win for two-year institutions, in addition to the money, is that Pell Grant can be used as the matching requirement moving forward. So everyone had wanted that for a very long time. Another one of the simplest bills, it removed 3 words and a comma from the statute. It just removed, you know, Pell or you could use loan or Pell Grant. It's just loan. So TEOG and Texas Grant mirror each other, and it's not really matching because you're not doing a one match, but it's just what are the funds you can put in the pot to say someone's tuition and fees have been covered, and so you're now on the same playing field. 2 years and 4 years are on the same playing field for what can cover tuition and fees. You're also on the same playing field as to our target for what we try to fund at. We try to fund at 70% of eligible students. And so they have raised the money up significantly on the TEOG side to get up to that level, as well as putting money into the Texas Grant Program to help maintain that level. Your concerns are not falling on deaf ears. They're falling on ears that are trying to figure out how to best influence that.
I would love to know how TASPA can maybe partner with the coordinating board in those efforts in the future, because those three things you listed, plus the DEOG, were on our list of
Yep.
three letters that we sent to legislators this year. So however we can best support the coordinating board in pushing those efforts, let Denise know, she'll be president next year.
And yes, I
But
really,
it's important, we want to
Yes.
help in those efforts however we can.
It's a barrier.
Yep.
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
big barrier, especially at a community college with TEOG. That 2.5 is huge.
yep. Yep, absolutely. And that's a place again that it's in statute. You know, if it was just the board needs to set rules that establish satisfactory academic progress. You can have a whole, like, get me in a side room someday and I'll tell you my opinions on satisfactory academic progress in the first place. But, you know, if you have satisfactory academic progress, how prescriptive do you get on that? So yes, completely are aware. And I think especially, you know, when you go back and look at this, you'll, you know, I mentioned I think there were 4 boxes that were in yellow or yellow and blue, because blue went, we need resources to do this. But I think those places are places where there's the greatest opportunity for that kind of interaction with the Financial Aid Advisory Committee, with TASFA, to think about, are we capturing all the things that we want to be able to present to the elected officials in preparation? As those of you who've been around a while have heard me say before, we're in different roles. Coordinating board assembles information to try to help elected officials have the greatest knowledge we can give them for the decisions that they need to make. We cannot lobby. Like, we cannot say, you know, this is our most important bill, please pass this, you know, that's outside of our scope. TASFA, individual institutions through their government relations offices, you know, there are different ways for you to put out what you feel is most critical. That's not a pond we can play in. We can definitely work with you all to be building that picture of financial aid policy. What are the most critical things that elected officials need to know to help them make the important decisions that impact how we maximize and optimize financial aid to remove those barriers. Other questions?
I have a question, because at our institution, I had a staff member that we had a representative on campus, and our staff member went to an event, talked to one of their assistants and tried to explain, it was just talking about selective service, really, initiative. Now, that was us as an institution, right? Contacting them and trying to broach that topic. Let me ask this, would it be a benefit for us as a group or TASFA as a group to have a generic bullet point or talking points that we could potentially do that? I guess where I'm going is, I know what affects my office specifically. I know what affects some people's offices. Would it be a benefit to have a talking points if we do get into a situation when we can't have that conversation with a representative or, their assistant or what have you, it's usually their assistant. So that we can all be saying the same thing. I don't know if others are willing to go that route. We have TASFA, which is a great resource for us. But sometimes if you have somebody on your campus and in front of you, that's also a good, point of conversation. But I also don't want to, it's hard to explain to those individuals really the effects of that statute.
In relation to what you're describing, of kind of, having some bullet points, some talking points and everything, that would definitely be on the TASFA side of the house as opposed to the Financial Aid Advisory Committee side of the house, because within the Financial Aid Advisory Committee, you're an agency advisory committee,
Right.
and so FAC can't lobby
Right.
because it's part of, but, as we assemble things, as part of our strategic priority work, and we try to put together things that help tell this story. If there's, we'll be able to put information out there, and if there's stuff that you all want to take from it, to create those kind of things,
So
Yeah.
we could
you could go on that
definitely pull
route.
off.
But that's definitely on the TASFA side of the house as opposed to the back side of the house.
And then we did this year with our legislative goals, the letter that was sent to legislators and Commissioner Keller kind of talked about each item and did say the effects and what the misalignment, exactly, confusion and potential barriers to students. So we tried to put, this is the issue and this is what it's causing. And then this letter was posted to the website. So it's just making sure we continue that and making sure people know that that resource is there, because you probably have to dig to find it. So
Yeah, I don't, was
stick
that
it on the,
emailed to the TASFA?
I
I think it was emailed. I think I read it, but I wasn't putting two and two together, really, honestly. So
That's why maybe if we make it more prominent, maybe it's not clicks in, maybe it's a link straight off the homepage, something like that. So I'll take that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. If you happen to know anyone that might want to be a deputy assistant commissioner overseeing our business improvement, compliance and data management areas, that salary. Off the top of my head, I believe it's on the website. I believe the salary is like 140 to 150. So you know anybody, send them. And we're also going to be posting that senior policy director position to help lead our policy efforts. Tackle the mountain of rules that we're going to have to create based on this legislative session. You have John, Jamie, or do you need me to?
And
Okay,
so what I'm
cool.
going to do really quick is I'm going to stop share so that we can get his video feed up if he turns on his video, and I'm going to mute our microphone and turn on our speaker so that we don't have that feedback. So John, if you'll let me know in chat if you're ready and I can get that started.
I am right here.
Okay, let me turn off our mic and let me turn on.
All right, can y'all hear me? All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to provide a little summary of what the legislature did this last regular session. So as you know, the legislature concluded their session on Monday. And just to reiterate the point Chad made, this was the most productive session for higher education I have witnessed in my 13 years at the coordinating board. Productive in terms of the sheer volume of legislation that was passed. They passed legislation on very kind of big profile issues like tenure policy and DEI offices in higher education. But they also passed dozens of other bills that created or amended financial aid programs, creating new programs to support resident positions in Texas, to support advising. So really this, those of you who may have done this for a while may recognize that typically it's a struggle to get them to focus on much higher education related. This time they just opened the barn doors, and quite a bit of legislation ended up getting through. And to be honest, we're still assessing everything that was passed and what the implications for that is going to be. As Chad mentioned, in terms of our rulemaking and implementation of these new requirements. So I'll start off with the budget. The legislature made substantial new investments in higher education this session. Increases in formula funding at all levels of higher education were a part of the budget. There was a major new investment in our community colleges through the recommendations of the Texas Commission on Community College Finance. And there was an additional dedication of funding to numerous programs at the coordinating board. One caveat to put out there regarding both the budget and the legislation that I'll discuss, we're still in what is known as the governor's veto period. So all of the legislation that passed during the regular session goes to the governor, and he has, I believe it's until June 20th, to either sign that into law or to veto it. Now and he also has the line item veto on the budget. So if there's any specific item of funding in the budget that he wants to veto, he can veto just that without having to veto the entire budget. We don't have any reason to believe that any higher education funding or legislation is in the crosshairs. So I think we're probably safe, but it's a consideration to know that we're not quite over the finish line on these bills. So in terms of the budget, the legislature appropriated over $1.54 billion for the coordinating board's major financial aid programs, Texas Grant, TEG, and TEOG. This included fully funding the coordinating board's exceptional item request of $153 million to increase programs so that we would continue to serve the same percentage of eligible students in the next biennium as we do in the current biennium. So the legislature agreed with that and included that funding in what they appropriated. Now, Chad also mentioned they went above and beyond when it came to TEOG. So part of the recommendations of that Community College Finance Commission was that TEOG be funded at an equivalent service level as Texas Grant. And the legislature agreed with that and invested just an incredible amount of additional funding into TEOG so that they will serve the same percentage of eligible students as Texas Grant. Speaking of Texas Grant, there was also some language included in Rider that authorizes the coordinating board to pursue mechanisms to guarantee that Texas Grant funding that Texas Grant Fund will fund eligible top 10% students. So that's something Chad and his team will be working with y'all on over the interim. The legislature also funded a couple of financial aid programs that the agency had originally launched through federal GEAR funding. So the Texas Transfer Grants and the Texas Leadership Scholars Program were launched with federal GEAR funding, which of course is now gone. But the legislature stepped in and agreed that state funding would be used to support those two programs. So that is included in the budget. And relevant to leadership scholars, the legislature also passed legislation, HB 1590, that formalizes that program in statute. Again, that was something that was just launched on our initiative. And the legislature has now created that as a statutory program. One of the things they did in that bill, you may know TLS is an undergraduate program. They also created a research scholarship component of that program that is focused on graduate students and helping support a diverse array of graduate students in Texas. Our budget also includes $25 million in funding for nursing scholarships and loan repayment. This is a result of SB 25, which was legislation that was passed this session that established several programs to support kind of the healthcare workforce and ensuring that we have the nurses and healthcare professionals that we need in Texas. So that bill actually took an old existing statutory program that authorizes scholarships and loan repayment to support nursing students and sort of revitalized it. And as part of that, the legislature included a contingency in our budget that we would get $12.5 million per year to support those. So the details of how that will be enacted will be worked out through rulemaking. So there were, that's kind of the big snapshot of the budget. One thing I'll say about the budget is it's not entirely clear yet whether some things made it in or didn't, because when the legislature puts out their final appropriations language, there is still language relevant to, they're called contingency riders. And so there are contingencies in the budget that if X bill passes, so much money will be available to fund that bill's requirements. But they're in Article 11 and they need to be moved into Article 3 for them to be active. So whether that happened is something that we're still trying to detangle a bit. So that's information, though, that we should have very shortly to find out which specific programs the legislature chose to fund during the coming biennium. But the legislature did pass legislation to create, at least a dozen new programs at the coordinating board. So we've got a lot of work to do. I'd mentioned the Community College Finance Commission. So the bill that actually enacted those recommendations was HB 8. And you may know that, the goal of that was to fund our community colleges on the basis of outcomes. So that's been a pretty major change to how we fund community colleges in Texas. But some other components of that bill are it creates a new financial aid program for dual credit students. So the Texas FAST program, which would be for financially needy high school students who are taking dual credit courses. That was included in that bill. It also included the provision that I believe Chad referenced that strikes the prohibition on Pell Grant being used to fill the bucket for TEOG students. The interesting thing about HB 8 is they ended up taking, I believe it was 8 other bills and sticking them on HB 8 as it was going through the process. So that bill ended up becoming a vehicle for a lot of higher education legislation to ultimately make it across the finish line. Some other bills that were passed, SB 2294 expanded the Texas First Scholarship Program. Currently, that program is only applicable to our research and emerging research institutions. This legislation opened it up to all institutions of higher education. There were also some new programs created. The HB 4005 establishes the Texas Competency-Based Education Grant Program. This is a bill that's been out there for a couple of sessions now. And this will, it creates a new financial aid program specifically for students enrolled in competency-based baccalaureate programs. It applies to our public and private nonprofit institutions of higher education, as well as Western Governors University. HB 4363 establishes the Future Teachers Scholarship Program. That is a financial aid program designed to assist students in educator preparation programs at public and private nonprofit institutions so that we can assist students who are going into teaching so that we can meet our teaching needs in Texas. And HB 2177 creates a pilot program that will provide financial assistance to students for the cost of accessing digital course materials. So that's kind of a new innovative approach that the legislature is taking to help spur greater use of those materials in higher education. Those are just, this is a very quick highlight, and I'll obviously be happy to entertain your questions. We will be producing, after every session, we produce a summary of higher education legislation. So it's on our website for the last session, but we will be producing this summary this summer. And that will include what passed ultimately in the budget, as well as, really every higher education bill that was enacted, so that you'll have a reference for what exactly the legislature did and what the requirements of that is. So that hopefully should be out in July. And then the other caution I'll say is that we're not done yet. So the governor has indicated that there are going to be multiple special sessions during this interim. As you may know, he called a special session immediately upon the end of the regular session on Monday to address property taxes and border security. And the House passed their bills and then adjourned. So that special session is done for now, but the governor is almost certainly going to call one or more additional sessions during this interim. Now, again, I have no particular reason to think that higher education is going to be an agenda item on those special sessions, but it's up to the governor. And the governor will decide what exactly will be in those special sessions when he issues his call. So that's, again, kind of the quick and dirty, but I would be happy to answer any questions. I would certainly invite Chad, Deshay, or anyone who has any other perspective on, important developments during the legislative session to chime in as well.
I have a question. For House Bill 8, the term educationally disadvantaged is used to determine what students would be eligible to, I guess, have the tuition waived. Okay, number one, who determines that? And number two, what does that mean, education disadvantage? Because you indicated financially needy, but I don't know if that's the same thing, since we're not going to be using like.
Well, let me say, I may well have misspoken on that. If the language in the bill says educational disadvantage, that is what carries. But I would certainly defer to Chad in terms of how we would go about establishing that.
Yeah, educationally disadvantaged is actually a defined term in the statute. And it means a student who was eligible for free or reduced lunch in the 4 years prior to when they're going to receive the FAST program. And so within the statute about the FAST program, which stands for Financial Aid for Swift Transfer, we love our acronyms in higher education. Within that set, it is a requirement that school districts and charter schools will provide the information as to which are their educationally disadvantaged students. We actually had a conversation yesterday with a working group that included quite a number of community colleges to talk about how do we best get that information moving between schools and institutions of higher education. And so we're going to be working with the Texas Education Agency to talk about kind of what would a structure look like that could try to centralize that. So rather than every school having to have their own communication with each school district, is there a way to be able to pull that in one place so that institutions of higher education, particularly community colleges, are able to quickly identify which are their educationally disadvantaged students.
So it won't be like, okay, this particular ISD or school, because of their level of needy students, automatically everybody qualifies for free or reduced lunch. Will not mean that every student would qualify for this. It'll be.
That I can't speak to yet because we need to work with TEA to figure out, and that's like, as John was mentioning, the mountain of rules that we need to create. And particularly for this, we have to go through the emergency rulemaking process because all of this takes effect this fall. So the TEOG funding increases are for this fall. The FAST program is for this fall. And so we're trying to figure out how to get that through. But that is one of the pieces of how do we make sure that the two-year colleges are going to have access to know which student qualifies for FAST, which student doesn't qualify for FAST.
I know our business office is so nervous, like how do they
Oh, yeah.
implement that?
They're not the only ones that are nervous. So I would say community colleges across the state are like, how's this gonna work? So we are working, and we are working with a broad group of community colleges, and we've got CFOs, we have community college presidents, we have more like on, I think, like the registrar side. I mean, it's a broad group to try to bring all these concerns to the table of questions like, you know, when do we set the tuition rate that applies to the FAST program? Because the institutions have to agree to use the specific tuition rate for the FAST program if they're going to participate in the FAST program. So we need to get that figured out. And so when do we need to, like, this year is just catch up. We totally admit that we're all just running to try to get something in place for the fall. And then we'll likely go through additional rulemaking to kind of tweak around the edges to make it work better for the 24-25 year. So we know 23-24 is just going to be rough and dirty. Let's get it done. And then let's make it better for the following year.
The question in the chat was, will TEOG funding changes take effect this fall or next year?
This fall. Yep, the Pell Grant piece takes effect September 1. And so two-year institutions are kind of in this odd place right now that, like, right now, technically, you know, if we were to go in and audit right now, it would have to look like this, but as of September 1, it can look like this instead. And so if you are, you know, need to have funding, I have trouble anyone saying that they won't have funding because we're putting so much funding into it. But, you know, come September 1, you can start applying that policy and make adjustments accordingly based on that policy. The money, you'll see the allocations. Our goal is to get those out by the end of June. We have to wait for the governor, as John said, we have to wait for the governor to sign the General Appropriations Act before we can say, here are your allocations. But our goal, everyone's been going, all the institutions have been going through their 10-day review process to make sure all the data is right. And so if we get all the data ready, then once we know the actual number, it's really just put it into the spreadsheet. It all spills through, and then we let you know, here's your allocation for that. And then with the FAST program, you know, based on how timing works, we literally can't get rules in place until August, because we have to like get them assembled, and we have to get them through the governor's office, and we have to get them approved by the board, and then we have to, you know, get them posted out for emergency purposes. But we're going to do our best to just keep people informed as we do it, as to here's what it's looking like it's going to be, so that as soon as it's out there. One thing with the FAST program is that there's 3 pieces to it: eligible institution, eligible course, eligible students. Eligible institution, the institution has to agree to abide by the statutes, you know, that you must use the FAST tuition rate that we established, that we're still figuring out what that tuition rate is going to be. Students that, FAST students, anyone who's an eligible student can incur no costs related to their education for the course. So you can't charge them an extra fee, you can't charge them for books, you can't have to go out and buy books on their own. It's, no cost to the students. There's the eligible course, and I can't do those off the top of my head, but it has to the course has to be applicable towards an associate or credential of value, and fall within a category of either it's towards the core curriculum, it's towards a field of study, it's towards field of study, what? Foreign language, yes, foreign language, or it's towards a certificate of value or credential of value. So it's got that. So you've got eligible institution, eligible course, eligible student. Eligible student means they have to be enrolled in one of these eligible courses at an eligible institution, and they have to be educationally disadvantaged. So free or reduced price lunch in any of the 4 years prior. So any, not all, any of the 4 years prior. Having said that, if an institution participates in this program, the institution must treat any eligible student in this manner. And so it is, if there's an eligible student, they enroll at no cost. The funding is a unique funding source because it comes out of the Foundation School Program. And so it is kind of the closest thing we have to an entitlement within the states. Every student who's eligible in an eligible course at an eligible institution, that institution will receive a chunk of funding for that student. So it's, that pot just will grow. Like the goal is that the number will grow and that we will have more money, as opposed to TEOG where we say, you've got this much money. With FAST, it's every student's eligible, enroll them at no cost. We're going to send you funding, based on that tuition rate that we've established. So it's a very, it doesn't fit into our current model in any way. And we're trying to jam it into our model in certain ways, but like even at yesterday's meeting, when we started to talk about it, and I listened to institutions raise their questions, I listened to the commissioner raise his views, like as I listened, I'm like, oh, and watch my ideas unravel before my eyes. And so last night I'm reading the statute again and I'm like, okay, well, here's another way we can approach this for it. So it's a whole new program that we are working to get information out on as quickly as we can. But it will be August before we can actually issue rules as to here's how it's going to work.
So you mentioned just one quick follow-up, no cost to the student, so that's tuition and fees and
No
books,
cost.
books as well, right?
Books, no cost whatsoever to the student. So,
When do schools start to say, okay, I would like to participate in the FAST program?
once we can create rules, we have to create rules first, because you can't participate in a program we don't have yet. So yeah, we totally admit this is like racing to the finish line. We are all just playing catch up on this. So fall
students-
semester, it's gonna be a bit bumpy.
Okay, that's
Spring semester will get better, next year will be even better. And institutions choose whether they want to participate in this program. So this is not a mandatory program. You don't have to participate in it. Institutions will need to make financial decisions about, what are they in a position to offer to, based on the different contracts they might have with different school districts and the like. Is it from a financial perspective, something that they want to just keep their current process? Or do they want to move over to this process? So that's a choice that every community college will need to make as to whether or not they want to or don't want to participate. We don't expect that every institution will participate because we realize that there are financial and strategic decisions that need to be made at the institutional level. So it's very specific that it's not a mandatory program for the institutions to participate in. It's just that if you choose to participate, then all these rules apply in the process. I originally thought that we were gonna be able to like write some emergency rules that would then immediately just turn over into the regular rules and we'd be good and we wouldn't have to do like another set of rules for 24-25. Yesterday's meeting shot that out the window. So what we are looking at with HB8 overall, because HB8 is enormous. And it puts just, I mean, the additional TEOG money that they put into the program, put into TEOG is just a drop in the bucket compared to how much they're putting into community colleges through this formula, this new approach to outcomes-based funding. And even with that, for all of this, we're taking this approach of we've got to get rules. So we're doing emergency rules. Those will be available in August. We'll immediately, whenever you do emergency rules, they're only good for, I think, 90 days. And you can get like 160-day extension or something. So we immediately have to then go through the regular rule making process. So emergency rules, we literally just say, here are the rules. Like there's no 30-day comment period, no nothing. It's just, here are the rules because we've got to get something out there for this emergency. Then we go through the regular rulemaking so that everyone can provide their comments. And then we're going to go into another set of rulemaking to immediately start working on improving the emergency rules and the regular rules we created so that we have rules for 24-25 that everyone's like, okay, now I understand this program. Now I can figure out how I'm going to participate. So
And it's only for fall and spring, not summer. We're doing a rolling.
I don't think it's limited. I think summer, I don't know how much dual credit happens in the summer, but I don't remember seeing anything that said it was limited to fall or spring.
People take advantage in the summer.
Yeah, so yeah, it'll be, basically, it'll be if a student and an eligible student enrolls in a dual credit course, then the institutions gets X number of dollars for every credit that that person's enrolled in. So if they enroll in, I'm so out of touch. I don't know. I mean, last time I took a dual enrollment course was 1987. So I don't know how it works anymore. But whether they're taking 3 credits, 9 credits, whatever it is, it's like they're in 9 credits, multiply it by that allotment that we're giving for each credit, and there's your money. So. And no, I don't know how it's going to work, but we are going to make it work because it is a huge benefit. And we want to make sure that we get that money out to institutions so that you can be supported.
There are no more questions in the chat, so. Any more questions?
One thing I'll just add to, or I want to emphasize what John was saying, is that as an agency, we really are, unlike any other session, trying to figure out what happened. Like usually on June 1, we're all like, yep, here's our bills, here's our money, we're good to go. Shay and I are like, oh, we need to create these rules, we need to tweak this operation piece. You know, this year, we're like, okay, that passed, but is there any money anywhere for that? And then we're like, well, that didn't pass. Oh, wait, it got buried in this 70-page bill over here. And so we are very much trying to figure out, like I'm working on a slide deck for just my team to be able to say, here's everything that happened. And I've got like little TBDs on slides. I'm like, I know there's more funding. I just don't know how much. Or, you know, we passed this and we're trying to figure out if it's funded. And then there's one program, and I don't remember the legislature's name, Thompson, Sinfonia.
Thompson.
So we have one line that it's literally one little line in the whole thousands and thousands of page General Appropriations Act that just says the Higher Education Coordinating Board has $1 million to administer the Sinfonia Thompson Scholarship. That's the entire guidance we have. That's it. So from that, we are gonna spin out a scholarship program. So, you know, other things are like, you do HBA fast program, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Sophronia Thompson Scholarship. So it's, I mean, the widest range of things that I've ever seen. And we're gonna make them all work for you. Fortunately, some of them don't take effect until 24, 25. So there's certain programs that we're like, oh, we have time to think about this. But then there are other programs that it's like, nope, this fall. Do it. So.
Have any other comments or questions? We can move on.
All right, thank y'all. If I'm going to drop off, but if any further questions come up regarding the session, feel free to communicate with Chad and Shay, and I'll be happy to follow up.
Thank you, John.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Chad. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 6, and that's up from our TASFA subcommittee. Don't know if Leah or Bridget. Okay.
Pass it to Leah. So since the last meeting, the TAFTA subcommittee, we did meet a couple weeks ago, started to discuss the 24-25 changes. And then we will meet again to confirm recommendations. And then Leah's gonna update us on the 23-24.
So since our last meeting, we've been making progress on the 23-24 TASFA. As you know, it was delayed from the October launch, and we've been progressively going through steps to get that out. Since it's so late in the year at this point, we're making sure all of our bases are covered before we actually open it. We don't expect a lot of applications at this point. But we do want to get it up and running so that we can have the schools receive any pending TASFAs. But we are planning to launch summer. And I say summer because it's a nice long window, but we really are at the final stages. We're in regression testing right now. So if you're familiar with development, that's kind of the last piece where we really kind of work out all the last remaining bugs. We have developed an admin portal that will be used internally for the coordinating board for now. And that's going to help support not only incoming phone calls from students and parents, but also institutions. And that portal is designed to be able to look up an application, see what status is in, trying to figure out where it's at in the process. And it actually has a view only function where we can see the application, which is going to be helpful. It's not just kind of a query. So that's in development. It's almost done. We did, over the past few months, we did some testing with the subcommittee on the test files that everyone's been so anxiously waiting on. And I am happy to report that we got little to no issues with the test files. And so now your question is, so when are we going to get them, right? I just confirmed yesterday that I can finally get them out through our official notification system. That was kind of the last hiccup where we're trying to figure out how to physically get a school file. So I think we found a solution yesterday. And so my goal is in June, I give myself a whole month to get these out, but we're going to send out a notice that would include a test file for the institution so you can see what they would look like. Again, test files, each school will do what they will with them. These are not necessarily something you can just take and load into your system. You would have to work with a vendor or your IT team if you're going to want to map it out, but it's a good indication of what to expect for 24-25, because we're planning to program them the same way. As you can imagine, it would change for 24-25 because some of the elements are going to be different, but you can see the overall structure and the flow and how we plan to do this going forward. So all of that is moving along. Expect to see test files in the next few weeks, hopefully sooner. That's a pretty big one. And then training, we are trying to get a demo / presentation ready for June so that we can show the schools, what does this thing look like? How will the student apply? What does that process include? And then how do the files flow through into our Move It system, which is our current SFTP process that allows us to move secure files back and forth. So all of that will take place in that demo. And again, sometime in June, And the last piece that we've been waiting on, which is kind of our last barrier, was we have transitioned from collecting a signature from the student, moving towards something similar to Apply Texas. Apply Texas, they use an acknowledgement box, which is fairly common on something where it's just a collection of information versus like a binding agreement or something like that. So we have replaced our signature process on the TASPA with an acknowledgement box. And so that has taken some additional programming. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because that will yet again change the file layout, but it's only really a cosmetic thing within the file because the positions within the file have not changed. It's just instead of collecting a signature date, it's now an acknowledgement date. So do expect to see a new file layout, the test file, and then again, the training. If there's anything else. Bridget already mentioned, we are trying to get with the committee. Obviously, there's a lot of work that has to happen for 24-25. So, you know, not to downplay 23-24, but I don't get the impression a lot of people are excited because that one's really kind of at a point where they're not going to be using it much, but it is the foundation of 24-25. So 23-24 is significant because once we can get that live, it really will help us make those changes for the FAFSA simplification that's going to impact TASPA. And so we're trying to figure out right now, we're doing this massive comparison on what exactly are they changing? What did they remove? What did they update? What did they move around? And how would that affect an institution that needs to use the TASPA to calculate that new SAI? We've been asked by multiple people, you know, what about housing status, you know, because that's being removed off of FAFSA and housing. There's no plans to remove that off of TASPA. So we do plan to leave that on there because we know that that will help institutions with the cost of attendance and whatnot. And then the other thing, like there's one more item. I'm drawing a blank on it now. Maybe y'all will ask me in a question in a minute, but really it's just how can we make sure that we're in that alignment, you're getting the information you need, and that we can get that out within a certain amount of time. So one question, oh, I remember what it was. And Chad is going to be talking about this in a little while, which is the state priority deadline. Anytime I've given an update on 24-25, people say, well, what about the priority deadline? I'll let him speak to that on how that's going to work. But there was a rule change out for comment that would allow the coordinating board to have flexibility on moving that. It has not changed. There's no changes yet. But again, he can speak to what that's looking like. But when I've talked to different institutions or school districts, people have been asking, what about the priority deadline? There's no changes at this point, but the rule change would allow us if we need to. So again, I'll let him kind of give an update when that topic comes up. But yeah, really this summer, we're going to drill down on what are the changes. And then I don't know if we're going to be able to give that update because I think the next meeting's in September. We should be done with them by then, but at least by that September meeting, we can announce what those changes are going to be. If it's in a time frame where we still can get y'all's buy-in or anything like that, we can do that. But I know in the past, we've even been able to approach the FAAC just via email, like here's kind of what we're thinking. Do y'all have anything, just so that we cover all our bases? So stay tuned for that. But I think the good news is, even though I think for the online TASPA, there's going to be a lot of work, I didn't get the impression that there was so many changes to TASPA that they kind of implied when they were going to roll this out. It affects y'all's calculations and your vendors and your software, but the TASPA, it's really what do we need to add, remove, or update. That's it. So stay tuned for that. And I'm ready for questions. Just be kind. Anything?
I have one
Okay.
in the chat. Does this mean the TASPA application will be up ahead of the FAFSA application?
The 24-25 TASPA will likely not be ahead of the FAFSA. No, we are trying to get the paper TASPA up and available, but because of the development work that has to happen, it's unlikely that we would get that out before the FAFSA. There's just, it's.
What about at the same time as the FAFSA?
Here's hoping, right?
So you're thinking paper would come before December, or you're saying paper would come the same time the FAFSA is coming?
I'm very hesitant to say budget.
Well, I guess in a perfect world,
In a perfect
be
world, we'll
nice
have the
to have
paper out
both.
this fall, because as long as we can identify the changes, the paper form's much easier to update, right? Like we just move around boxes, we make it fillable, we put it out in the universe. The online is obviously the biggest one. It takes development, we need resources, funding, all these things that typically slow down something that is online. So yes, we do plan to have the FAFSA on the paper, both in English and Spanish. When that will be, I can't say exactly, but we do anticipate in the fall. And fall again is very broad. It's like, what, September to December? 4 months.
Most likely the paper application would come out prior to the online version of 24-25, just because, again, we're dealing with two different type of developments at that point.
and I think that that's a set of precedent, like a type of, fall, winter, spring, summer, but could we get a month? I know it's easy, I know it's real easy, like, oh, in the fall, but I think it's important to try to align it because we're already gonna be scrambling so much with FAFSA coming out in December.
Do our best.
And again, we've historically gotten the paper application out in October. So again, if the changes are paper-wise, as we're looking at removing it or adding, as we're going through that comparison, those are the things we would focus on for the paper version, and then try to align that into the development of the online. So the paper obviously would come out before the online version of it. So yeah, we can say that the paper would come out before then. We would historically still try to keep that window of time in October, making certain that if there's no other things as far as priorities that would prevent us from getting that paper application out in the time frame that we historically get it out in October. So, and considering that being recorded, that means people will stick me to October, right? I didn't give a date in October though. The date was December.
That's a mystery.
But I did say October, you asked for a month, Bridget, you did ask for a month, so, yeah, so paper application, yes, so that's exactly what we'll be working towards. Maintaining that historical.
And on the high school side, if I can ask a question, this is Lisa Schomburn. We use Apply Texas from the counselor suite to view FAFSA. And oftentimes we see many errors and students who have completed the FAFSA and it's still not on there. So our tracking for TASFA and FAFSA under House Bill 3 is sometimes done by hand. And in my case, we have 728 seniors to track. So our concern is that everything's going to talk live through Apply Texas as well.
So we will be passing through TASPA completion for those students that complete one through the online version. Obviously, paper, you would still have to track manually. We do anticipate a higher percentage of accuracy with ours because the difference between the federal is we receive ISO information from the department, and then we have to do like a crosswalk with, Apply Texas. It never always matches up well, whereas with ours, we maintain the list of high schools, and then that is directly fed into Apply Texas. So we're hopeful that the accuracy will be better, but until we go live and we start seeing that,
Right.
that pipe through of data, we don't know yet, but that's the
Right.
goal.
Thank you.
Follow up in the chat. What's the rationale for moving ahead with the paper application over the virtual? Why not align the release? Yeah, that's it. That was the question, sorry.
Well, one, it's so that we can have access to students so they can start applying for financial aid. And because the paper takes a lot less resources and energy to update, and we have to produce it anyway, we're always going to produce the paper. We're prioritizing that. Well, it's not even prioritized. We just have different teams working on them. So we're going to have the paper one in tandem with the development, but the development will just take longer because of the number of steps that have to happen to make sure that it's secure, accurate, all the things. So
yeah, paper is always going to be available, so we will be having one team working on the paper updates, and then we'll have another team working on the online, and I'm involved in all of it, so if you have questions, you can reach out, but yeah, I hope that answered the question.
And the paper does help drive the development of the online, so again, having that produced prior to the online. In parallel helps keep them much more aligned. But again, those resources are different and the development is quite different.
I see someone says talking, but I don't know.
That's us.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, it's your name, sorry.
Yeah.
So little, I need glasses, sorry.
I don't have any more questions in the chat, and I fixed the feedback issue.
Any other questions from us here? Okay, we want to move on to the next agenda topic, and it's our data collection subcommittee. Turn it over to Dee Dee.
Okay, committee met at the end of April and we got an ePASPA update, which Leah just gave us. The next item that we discussed was on the FAD data submission portal. At that time, the recording board was still on target to open the new portal for cycle 2 that opens on June 7th. For security purposes, initially, the financial aid directors or the person who has access to will have access to this new data submission portal. And my understanding is that once we get the official notifications, then you can request additional access for other folks to be able to submit. Those folks will need CD Pass access. Is that correct, Michelle?
Accurate, yes.
And then the discussion was the coordinating board is proposing eliminating cycle 1 of the FAS for the 23-24 year, and the committee was supportive of that. Getting rid of 1 is a good thing. And then there was a lot of discussion on the deadline date for the cycle, and the last cycle, November 13, 2024 was the current proposal. And there were some comments about potentially changing it to a midweek, Tuesday or Wednesday instead, because coming in, if there are people who are trying to finish over a weekend, there's no support from the coordinating board. Not sure what this group thinks about that, whether that's something you support is having a midweek or keeping it on Monday would be fine. The next topic, we received a bunch of updates on the student financial aid programs that Deshae will speak to later in our agenda. And that was pretty much it. Any questions or thoughts on the FADs?
When did you say the new portal information will go out?
It's June 7th, I believe, when cycle 2 opens on June 7th. That's when the data submission portal. Is that still on target?
That is still on target. Probably gain more gray hair trying to ensure that stays. But yes, to Dee Dee's point, the FADs will open and launch on June 7th under the new submission portal. There will be an announcement most likely on Monday describing, as Dee Dee did, as far as the access has changed. So if you will not have the same number of individuals who can just access the submission portal, because that submission portal is a shared portal with those individuals who do reporting for your CVM. And that submission portal is going to continue to grow in access for other divisions, probably at the institution, who are going to use that. So it'll become a more universal submission portal. So because of it, access to that particular portal has been restricted. And so right now we are only having the director or the reporting official who might have had FAD access before be the ones who actually will have access to the data submission portal, which we will also provide a listing of who that individual is at your institution, so you won't be guessing like who actually has access to upload and actually be a part of it. But if you feel like another person at your institution needs to gain access to that data submission portal, we do give instructions. We will have instructions in the announcement. We'll also have updated those instructions in the FAD manual that will be released at the same time in that announcement, letting you know that you can send that request through our user access mailbox. And then at that point, we will upload that specific individual. So you will not be able to go out to CD Pass as you have in the past. CD Pass in the past, but to access the application, which I think was FAD data certification or validation, to gain access. Nor can you go out there and get access to the data submission portal, even though the application is available. Again, that access is very restricted, and so therefore you have to go through another means to have someone else at your institution get access for the FAD submission. So all of that will be in the announcement, but we are still on target to go live on June 7th. So we are scheduled to do some deployment over the weekend for production. Yeah, so get to work on the weekend too. So I'm excited. But we are very, very excited to be able to launch this new submission portal. We're hoping that the process will be a lot easier. It allows you to do your justifications or what you have considered overrides for those who are very familiar with the FAD process within the portal. So no more sending out emails. It allows you to see the reports right there in the portal. You'll be able to download them into however you need, Excel, PDF, or whatever version that you'll have. So hopefully this particular way of processing your file will be a lot simpler than the MOVEit process. But we will see. So fingers crossed, all goes well. On launch date, right? It's launch date.
I have a question. Will there be a helpline that we can call? Because I'm gonna have problems. I'm sure operator error. But somebody will have to call them and say, okay, Denise, let me hold your hand.
Yeah, definitely any one of the individuals on my staff can assist. Of course, I'm intimately involved into the process, so you can always reach out to me if you have any challenges with accessing, or the individual who is at your institution has access uploading your file. We're all very much on call for any technical issues that may come up on June 7th as well.
I have, so the announcement is gonna come out Monday, right? Electronically via email?
Yes, so yes, it will.
Okay, so for some reason, I'm only getting certain emails from the coordinating board, not all. I don't get them. I just got an email from one of my IER department from an email that you sent a memo on May 18 about the net price calculator. I never got that email.
Well, let's chat during breaks. I can figure out which particular topping are you in for our notification. Okay, we have several different topics, and so let me determine why not. Why are you blocking my notification? No, definitely. Yes. So if anyone is not receiving notifications, we do have them on our student financial aid programs webpage as well. So if you are not receiving notifications, it may be just a good rule of thumb. Not that I'm saying you need to go out to the student financial aid webpage every day to see, but maybe, once a week if you have nothing else to do on your free time, just to check and see, but always send me an email and, just make sure that was there anything that you're missing, but reach out if you get something from another area or another person that you felt you should have received that notification, definitely reach out to me and let me look into it to figure out why you are not specifically receiving notifications, because you should definitely be receiving notifications.
Anything else? We can move right along. Oh. You want to move?
I'm sure, yeah.
It's good.
Yes.
I know, it's good.
Oh, in the bathroom?
We are back. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again, after our good break that we had. We are moving on to agenda. Oh, I need to do a roll call. So sorry, forgot about that. Okay, so let's go back and do a quick roll call. Denise? Here. Victoria? Here. Bridget? Here. Holly? Is she on? Okay, Shauna?
That's not her.
She's on. Thomas Ratliff, he's on. Joseph Ruiz,
Present.
Joseph Sanchez,
Here.
Dee Dee.
Here.
Rachel is not joining us. Jackie Adler. Here. Jackie Cecilia Jones.
Here.
Thank you. And South out. Evian here. Gilbert Zavala.
Here.
Thank you. Paulette is out. Scott.
Here.
Gabby. Here. Jackie. Lisa Schobrin.
Here.
Thank you. Linda.
Yes, here.
And Deshae.
Present.
Thank you.
Shauna Norton's here. It wouldn't let me unmute a while ago.
Okay, thank you, Shauna. Okay, so now we're moving on to agenda topic 8, our legislative subcommittee, and I will turn it over to Denise.
Well, I will make this short and sweet because we've kind of pretty much exhausted all of our legislative updates between Charles and between John. The TASFA Legislative Committee and the Financial Aid Advisory Board Subcommittee of the legislation is actually, we've combined those, and our chair is actually part of the TASFA Legislative Committee as well. So the reports that Chris Murr has been sent out to TASFA really explain where the bills are. For those of you that are not TASFA members, you can follow those on the Texas State Legislative website as well. But I think everybody has pretty much asked all their questions about the House bills that are current and that have passed and waiting signatures. But if anybody has any questions, I will attempt to answer. So I'll just open the floor at this point.
Much to ask.
Right, hearing none, I will conclude my report.
Okay, thank you, Denise. We will move on to item 9. And back to Dee Dee for our state association updates.
Okay. This spring, we completed our new 8 officer workshop up in DFW, and there were about 85 participants, so that went really, really well. We also completed our spring regional trainings, and that was offering a NASPA credential and student eligibility. And as of our last 4th meeting, there was about a 40% pass rate on that from the attendees. We were still waiting on 2 of the locations to test and report, so hopefully that'll be up at our next meeting. We have been working a lot on our joint SWASFA and TASPA, our first joint conference this year up in Hyatt Regency DFW. That should be a really big conference combining both. We're working on trying to get good sessions. The proposals are open now. So if you are interested or have thoughts about session proposals, we really want to get a good variety of sessions this year. We expect registration to open in early June with a tentative agenda on the sessions we have so far. So keep that. And our theme this year is traveling through uncharted territory, because that's what this year is going to be about. Lots of change. and we'll travel through it together. We did at our last board meeting in April also start a board self-assessment. So we're looking at, Denise, our president-elect, led us in that effort. And we're trying to make sure that we as a board are really meeting the mission and vision of TASPA and focusing on the things that we should be. That's going to help create our new strategic plan that ends this year for the plan moving forward for the next 3 years. We do have elections coming up later this summer. We have a slate of candidates that you can see on the TASPA website. So check that out. And then later this summer, the elections will take place for our new board and new president. And that's it. Any questions?
You have a question for TASPA, and forgive me if I'm forgetting any of these details, but we usually do the trainings in Houston for the high school guidance counselors, and so it was national training for mentors, and then it got, I think, moved to the state level, and we just kept doing it, and we had a PowerPoint, and we updated ourselves, and we would do that to train the guidance counselors. And so they really want us to do it this fall, and there are a lot of changes. So I guess my question to TASPA is, there is a committee that works with that outreach, right? And so I was hoping there would be something posted in the fall with some changes that we don't know how to make yet.
When that was discussed at the board meeting, at this point, we kind of really don't know all of the changes, but they are sitting and kind of waiting like the rest of us to figure out what exactly do we need to change? How do we update those materials? So as soon as we have some more solid information, the plan is to get that stuff updated. Any other questions? Thank you. Okay. We are moving right along. Okay, agenda item 10 is any updates from our high school districts? I think Lisa and Shauna are both on virtual.
I think the only update that we might have is just that all of our counselors are kind of in a tizzy fear of the financial aid situation next year as far as the application process and the pending opening of that, but it'll be what it will be.
Well, and we understand that, the colleges know that they're changing the FAFSA date and they're all going to adjust, and Questbridge knows that they're going to need to adjust, and it is what it is. And we're trying to hang in there and make it through the last couple of days of school with senior clearance. So, and making sure all the kids have their FAFSA and TASPA done under HB 5.
Thank you. Well, we can join you here in the frustration and anxiety of the late release of the FAFSA task. So we're with you on that. So we'll be our own support group here. Okay. Thank you, ladies. Let's move on to agenda 11, update from Deshay on student financial aid programs.
Thank you. Well, as you probably heard, we have been doing a lot within the Office of Student Financial Aid Programs. Charles alluded to that earlier with the kind of reorganization of that particular area. A lot of different promotions happened. You mentioned my recent promotion as well as Leah's recent promotion. Very excited. We've also promoted some additional employees within our staff so we can gear up and kind of look at all the new programs that we all heard coming on our pipeline. But one of the things that we are also very much excited about is we're going to be launching a new grant application and payment portal later this upcoming fall. And that was one of the items that we talked about with the data collection subcommittee. So the grant application payment portal, and we like our acronyms, GAP, GAPP, is a modernized platform that will integrate about 14 out of, right now we have 20 and soon to be more financial aid programs, which will consist of our grants, our work study programs, our loan repayment programs, as well as exemption and scholarship programs. The system will allow institutions to approve our administrators at those institutions to approve users. So we are kind of revamping that whole user access request that many of you all have had to use that spreadsheet and kind of go through it. So now you'll be able to use this particular portal to update user access. upload documents, you'll be able to request payments, you'll be able to monitor your spending, send communication directly to the coordinating board staff. You'll be able to transfer your funds between the two programs, the grant programs and the work study, instead of having fillable forms. So pretty much it's a one-stop shop portal for you to do a lot of great things in it. So some of the programs that we plan to launch this fall will be our 3 grant programs. So the Texas Grant TOG and TEG programs, where you'll be able to request your funds through, as well as our work study programs. As you know, there were some significant changes to the work study programs as far as you being able to request your funds. So you no longer will you'll have that lump sum allocation sent to you. And if you already kind of looked at that 10-day data that came out sometime as far as what those allocations potentially look like when you opted in or out of those programs, you actually have to request those funds. So this will be the portal that you'll be able to do that in. As well as if you participate in educational aid or the bilingual program, these are the other programs that you'll actually be using to request those particular payments as well. So like I said, launching this fall, all of those programs will be built into that particular portal to allow you the ability to request those funds. About mid-August, you can put in that request. But as you know, with the state agency, we will not be releasing any funds until after September 1st. But you can put in your early request for that. And so more to come on what that will look like. More information will be delivered this summer. We will do some training, obviously, because that will be a new way of accessing the portal. And so we're looking really forward to this new improved way. And as we continue to grow our portfolio for our financial aid programs, we will introduce more programs into this portal. So this will pretty much be an area that you will do all of your financial aid programs in. If you participate in the task, this will also be the portal that we will be doing the task program as well. So like I said, more to come on that.
What was the name of the?
It's called the Grant Application and Payment Portal. So GAP. So we refer to it as GAP. GAPP.
Question.
Yeah.
When we request funds, for example, for TEOG, will we be able to see the total that's been requested,
Yes.
like a running total? So we know when we run out of money.
Yes, you should be able to see that right now on the current system. It tells you your original allocation. If you've gotten additional funding, like you carry forward, it will show you a revised allocation, and then it'll tell you remaining allocation. So it does give you that capability in the current system, which again is another acronym. GPP, so you know, we just added an A to this new one, GAP. But yes, so it will have some similar functionality, let me say that, in this newer portal, but you will still be able to have a summary of what you have already used. You'll have the ability to, like I said, monitor and track. So you'll have some reporting functionality where you'll be able to extract more information out of this particular system if you haven't already been using that similar functionality in the current application that you're using now. But yes, you will. And we've already talked about the financial aid database, so we're gearing up for that. Recent announcements that we sent out, I mentioned just shortly ago about the memo that was sent out not too long ago regarding 10-day data review. And that was for the Texas Grant TEOG work study programs, as well as educational aid. So this was a 10-day data review where you're going to look over your data to ensure that the information that we were using from the financial aid database, depending on the particular year that we were using to calculate in the preliminary allocation, is exactly that, preliminary. Because obviously until we have the General Appropriations Act actually signed and we have that finalized, then we'll be able to send out the final allocation. So that 10-day data review was strictly overlooking at the data that there was any discrepancies, you had to send those discrepancies in by May 30th. And so that was on Tuesday, I believe. So if you did have any discrepancies, we will look at that. And if we needed to make any changes, then we would make changes, and that would be reflected within the final allocations when those come out after the General Appropriations Act is signed. So those were the recent announcements regarding that. In addition, we sent out the TEG opt-in, opt-out. So for private institutions, you are required to opt into the program, and you do that every odd year. So being 2023, you have to opt into this particular program. You have until today to complete that particular form. So the deadline date to send in the opt-in out form is June 1st. We take that, and then that's when we will send out the 10-day data review for those private institutions. So if you're a private institution wondering, how come I didn't receive my 10-day data review for TEG? Well, we first have to receive the opt-in, opt-out forms. And then from there, we do the calculations, and then we send out that 10-day data review. So that announcement will come out after today. We also sent out a net price calculator. We sent that out on May 18th. And so we sent a memo out for that. And the deadline to make sure that you have that uploaded to us is June 23rd. And so if you haven't already seen that memo, it is posted out on our website with the instructions on how to upload. We're still using the Department of Education's template that was released. And so it tells you the year that you're going to use. It also tells you the instructions on how to properly upload that. That was, like I said, released on May 18th with the deadline date of June 23rd to get that to us. And just to be very clear, that is required of all public institutions that enroll full-time entering first-year students. So you are required to do that. Community colleges, private institutions or health-related institutions are encouraged to use it, but are not required. So let me say that. We also recently released our summer institutional calendar. So that goes all the way until the end of August. So it has some really great important dates. We will have an upcoming comptroller closure happening in August. So that is very important to note, because that means that we won't be releasing any disbursements for loans. So if you're participating in our college access loan or our forward loan, we will have a hard stop of not releasing any funds in August because of the comptroller schedule. So we'll send out that as a reminder, as well as August 1st is the last date for you to request any 23 funds from all of those programs, your grant programs, educational aid, bilingual. So keep that in mind. If you are still having funding that you have yet to expend for 23, this is not a carry forward year. So if you haven't spent up all your money, you do not carry forward any of those funds into the next fiscal year, which is 24. So keep that in mind. We do have quite a number of schools who did have quite a lot of money still on the table as of today. I don't know if you plan to use that for the summer, but keep that in mind. It's not a carry forward year. And you have until July 1st to say you want to transfer those funds, but there is a percentage, either 25% of your allocation or 60,000, whichever is the lesser. So you got a lot of money sitting on the table. I highly recommend determine what is the best strategy on how you would like to expend those money until August 1st, which is the last date that you request those funds. And then we also sent out a Good Neighbor. If you're participating in the Good Neighbor program for fiscal year 23-24 for those selected students. So again, upcoming deadlines, June 1st today for the TEG opt-in, opt-out, June 23rd, net price calculator, July 1st for those institutions who plan to request a transfer of funds between their state grant and work study programs.
And what was the cutoff for Cal? You said in August?
Yes, it's August 14th, I believe.
I mean, that's when we can request funds.
So August 1st is the last day that you can request any of your Texas grant funds for 23, fiscal year 23. So right now, educational aid, bilingual. But if you have loan disbursements, like if you're participating in the college access loan program or Ford loan, and you're looking for like summer money coming up or potentially any fall money coming up, comptroller is going to shut down. That means we're not going to be releasing any loans. So people like to put disbursement dates in August, and I'd be very cautious about those disbursement dates in August. Because
That's what it's for your 23, right?
either 23 or 24, depending on how you're setting your programs up.
And the full month of August.
August 14th is probably gonna be the cutoff.
Okay.
Of when the last probably disbursement would go out of our agency.
Okay.
Something new, or this is.
No,
View
it's not,
where
it's
like
not, it is not new. We've just been trying to do better at informing schools about the comptroller closure. So it doesn't impact those schools. So what typically happens is, we inform schools that, hey, we're not releasing any disbursements, and that could be an impact to the school and the student because they're not aware that the disbursement dates they have already pre-selected had an impact at that point. So we are gonna
14 to the end of August.
yes, so we're gonna send out more, yes, we're gonna send out more communication to inform the schools, and we've sent them out in the past, but I just want to be very transparent with a larger audience so you guys can plan ahead of time before that communication gets out. And normally the comptroller sends us communication in July, so we try to get that out as soon as
And
possible.
it's due to the like switch over the fiscal years or something. That's
Yes.
what it is. So it's always happened.
It always
August
happens.
14th, the end of August.
It's usually through Labor Day.
Yeah, it's usually through Labor Day. Mhm. And on the institutional calendar that came out for the summer, we do put a blurb in there about, I want to feel like we put a blurb in there. If we didn't, yeah, if it's not in there, we'll make sure to update it in there.
We'll add it in some.
Yeah, I think we put something to say that we'll at least add the Texas comptroller closure in the summer, so we'll send out more information. I just got the date because I went to a meeting yesterday. So more to come on the Texas comptroller closure dates. So definitely wanted to bring that to everyone's attention so that way you guys can continue to plan ahead. And then just really quickly to give you upcoming memos that are coming down the pipeline in the next couple of weeks. We are going to be sending out a memo for your 24-25 program participation agreement. So this is the last year that you guys are under this current participation agreement. We need it for the next 2 years. So we're gonna get that sent out to you all so you can get that signed. It's gonna look pretty much the same as it was before. And it's about a 2-page program participation agreement that you'll look over, and then you'll sign that and send it back to us. We will sign it, and then we will be able to execute. It's a 2-year agreement, so every 2 years you'll do a program participation agreement. We'll also be sending out, as I mentioned before, about the 24-25 10-day data review for the G program. I'll be sending out an announcement regarding the 23 FAD cycle 2 when it opens on June 7th, and then more information about the launching of the GAP. So that is all that I have. Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you, Leah. How could I forget? Program guidelines, the 3 program guidelines came out yesterday for Texas Grant, TEG, and TEOG for 23-24. And Leah and her team have been heading up the program guidelines. So there were definitely some updates to it. So if you haven't had an opportunity to kind of look through them, make sure that you do. We definitely have a different look and feel of those program guidelines. The others will be coming out shortly as well. We are still working through the finalization of those program guidelines, but we did want to make sure to get out the 3 grants guidelines. The one program guideline that had the most significant changes in them was the TEG. So for the private institutions, you'll definitely want to look at those because there was some significant changes. Our announcement does let you know the updates that took place and what specifically took place in each one of the program guidelines. So that way you're aware of the changes that were made to that. So definitely a shout out to Leah and her team because they worked feverishly to get those out. How would I ever want to shortchange that? Because I know that was part of our other set of gray hair as well, trying to make sure we can get those out. So those came out yesterday, late yesterday afternoon. And I do believe that is all that I have as far as updates on what's happening in student financial aid programs that haven't been addressed. Any questions?
Other program guidelines that I listed for that Texas First Scholarship.
Texas First. So the Texas First program, there haven't been any guidelines, but we are going to do a specific training for the 10 institutions that are currently impacted right now. So I do believe, I think John or Charles may have alluded to, I think John did. He talked about the bill that is waiting for signature regarding expanding the from the emerging and researching institutions to all public institutions for the Texas First program. But that would not go into effect once signed until September 1st. So right now it's still under the researching emerging institutions that only impacts the 10 institutions. And so we're going to do something very specific for them only. And then we're also going to release a fact sheet that is going to talk about the Texas First and how to handle that. Once that is signed, the rules will be amended to handle the expansion of the elimination of just the research and emerging institutions and opening up to the public institutions, but the program in itself doesn't, as far as the scholarship program, does not change much. So if you're not familiar with the Texas First, it is for those students who graduated early, either a semester or more under the Texas First diploma program. And once they graduate early under the Texas First diploma program, they can be eligible for the Texas First scholarship. Currently, they can take that, the agency, the coordinating board, would issue out a state credit certificate to those eligible students. And they can take it right now to one of the 10 eligible institutions who are considered emerging or researching institutions. And then at there, they would apply that state credit. There's a little bit more beyond just that state credit certificate. It's either tuition fees, state credit, whichever is the lesser is what's applied. So just kind of get it off the ground. So still the agency is working with TEA, but we will have more information coming out with it, but we are going to schedule a specific training with those 10 institutions, because we do know of students who have been graduating under the Texas First diploma recently. So we want to make sure that you guys know what to do with those students now.
General ETA.
June, to my understanding, yes. See, I gave a month, Bridget. Summer fall. I didn't say summer fall, I said June. I said June. I think it's June. I think it's late June. Like, so let me see. I even gave a time for you too.
I'm doing a window. It still gives you a window.
It's a good window, but it's not
days.
exactly. This is not 3 months. So it should be late June. Any other additional questions? I think that concludes my update.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving to our discussion topics, and right now we're going to talk about the members that are their terms are ending for our committee. A list of those judges. So first of all, thank you for those that are leaving. We appreciate your service. Obviously, this committee has been a great help for me, but I know, just across the state, the information, the knowledge, the decisions that we make at these committees are really helpful. So thank you again for those that are stepping down, or their terms are ending. I will go ahead and list the members. Denise, although, is she really?
She'll be back.
She'll be back as.
Not a bad thing.
Yeah. Victoria Chin from Texas Christian. Bridget Ingram at A&M, thank you. Holly Nolan, and she's on. No, she's not here. Shauna Norton, thank you so much for your service. We appreciate that. She's from Wichita Falls ISD. Thomas Ratliff, Abilene Christian, thank you, Thomas. Joseph Ruiz from Del Mar, thank you. And Joseph Sanchez, thank you.
That was quick.
Yes.
That was quick.
You took over someone else's term.
So that is it for this discussion topic that I think we move right along to Deshays with the proposed nominees.
Yes. So, we do have, because of, some of the members whose term ends and some who, throughout, this past year who had to leave the committee, it opened up some vacancies. And so we have a list of recommended 23 financial aid advisory committee members that was in the packet, meeting agenda packet, but I will list out those recommended advisory committee members. They will go to our July board meeting to be approved. Their first meeting with us, once approved, will be in September. So our September financial advisory committee meeting, once our July board approved them, we will have on board with us Rebecca Moreno Adorno from Texas Christian University, Mary Escobar from Angelo State University, Amy Wilson from Sam Houston State University, Beth Tolan from the University of North Texas, Heather Fountain from Texas A&M University, Jackie Kelly from Kilgore College, Tonya Richardson Dean from Trinity Valley Community College, Michelle Hill from Alamo College District, Erica Ramos from Far San Juan Alamo ISD. And then, of course, the infamous Denise Welch will come on board as the TASPA representative as well. So Dee Dee's last meeting with us would be the September FAC meeting. And then Denise will then come on board as the TASPA in December's meeting. So I think that's how TASPA works. So those are our recommended new FAC members once they are approved at the July board meeting, and they will come to September's meeting. September's meeting for FAC will be an in-person one as well. So you all recall at our March, I want to say it was I think it was December. It might have been December, yeah. So December, we talked about having a hybrid approach to the 23 FAC meetings, where 2 would be in person and 2 would be on virtual. The 2 that we agreed would be in person would be our June and September. And the reason for that is the June would be for those who would be leaving the FAC. So then that way we got at least that interaction. And then September would be for the new individuals coming on board. So again, that same interaction. March and December would be our virtual ones. Our September one would be in person, and then our December would be virtual. And that is my updates. Questions?
Move right along to our next discussion topic, and we have Charles back, and he is talking about our state priority deadline.
Hello again. So, as has been widely publicized, the FAFSA is running a little late this year. And sometime in the month of December, we'll have a FAFSA. We gotten a lot of questions about, well, what's the state gonna do in terms of the priority deadline? And so just as a reminder, the state's, the statute is just that we need to have a priority deadline for the four-year universities. Well, colleges, two-year institutions, and privates are encouraged to utilize. It's required for the four-year universities by statute. But we set the priority deadline in rule. So that's one of those places where we have a little more flexibility because of how they wrote the statute. In rule, we set that. One of the challenges, given the questions that have come up this year of is it possible to change those dates, is that the January 15th date is in the rule. And so we can't change that date without changing the rule. What we decided to do as an agency is rather than like doing a new rule and changing the date for this year and then doing another rule to change it back, we have set out a rule that should be that will be presented to the board for approval at the July meeting that provides the commissioner with the flexibility to alter that rule, to delay the deadline, basically when there's significant exigent circumstances. I think one of the examples was something along the lines of, should the federal government not do what they need to do? I forget the exact words that we used, but that's the goal, is to set that out so that in the future, we will have the ability, should something unusual occur. I think we use examples of natural disasters, those kind of things. So that rule won't be official until August, because we approved at the July board meeting, posted the Texas Register. It's 20 days after you post it that it becomes official. So technically, the commissioner doesn't have this capacity until late August. But what we're going to do is have the conversations now so that we can advise the commissioner such that if he needs to use that additional flexibility, he can do so quickly once the rule provides him with that flexibility. In terms of, we put out the rule for comment. There were people, a couple comment back, all of which have been in support of the rule. And really it was kind of, I support the rule and here's all my ideas on why you should change the date this year. I'm like, that's why we're doing this rule. So clear that people, are looking for this to happen. And wanted to get your input so that would be in a good place again to advise him, because you all won't be coming in together again until probably after we've already made a decision. As you have thoughts on whether or not we should delay the priority deadline, and if so, what date do you think we should use for the priority deadline for the 24-25 FAFSA?
For January 15th, what was the priority deadline? Was it
March 15th, used to be March 15th.
To me, that sounds like a good round number, March 15th.
That's
I mean-
kind of what we were,
Right.
those of us that have been doing this for a while, that was the date we used.
Since it's got since the FAFSA should come out around the time it used to. Late December, well, I mean, it was January 1st, but around that time, March 15th seems to be the logical.
My concern is by some. Praise God, we get everything done. We may try to package, I mean, we're always trying to package earlier. And I think March 15th might put schools in we have to package after that date. On the FAFSA website with all the other states, a lot of them are using ASAP. I don't know if ASAP is something that all students and everyone understands, but something like that, ASAP after application comes out, and then check with your school for their deadline. And we do, on our site, we do state deadline, and then we do recommended submission date. So right now, we have 2 dates, but we kind of call them different things. Of course, that's in a world of October being the FAFSA launch, where we say December 15th, really, we want you to have it done by. I don't think we'll be able to package by March 15th, but I'm wondering if that will put us in a bind of having to wait till after then, because that's the state deadline.
Well, and one of the things to keep in mind is how the priority deadline works. Because the priority deadline is not a guarantee of funding. The priority deadline is simply that similarly situated students, one who applies before the priority deadline and one who applies after the priority deadline, different decisions can be made on them. Even within folks, someone who applies, say it comes out December 1, someone who applies December 1st and someone who applies March 15th can be treated differently as well, given the order in which they came through your system. So, and as you mentioned, you already have 2 different dates as well, and some institutions likely have those 2 different dates. So this doesn't impact your ability to do what you need to do. The piece we'll need to figure out is what's the date we can put, because the state requires us to pick a date. So that's one of the challenges, because I've seen the language and I agree with the language of, as soon,
So we're not able to put as soon as possible. Like you're saying, you have to pick a date.
we have to have a date. Yeah, we can't just have the date be as soon as you can. We do have to have a date. We can look at that word, that we encourage individuals to apply, once, I forget the words that some other states have used, but yes, we do actually have to have a date. So, because if we say as soon as possible, one person could say, well, the soonest I could do it was March 16th. Someone else could say, well, the soonest I could do it was July 16th. So we do, unfortunately, in this case, have to have an actual date. But we know, I know from talking with everyone, there are some institutions that run out of money before they even get to the priority date. And there are some institutions that are awarding well after the priority dates. So it all has to do with how your own funds apply into this situation.
So in reality, that priority date really is for the point of helping us differentiate similarly situated students.
Yes.
So if these 2 are equal in every other way, but this one met the priority deadline, the funds go to them if I have to choose.
Yes. Yeah, that is basically what it comes down to. Because we know, especially with Texas Grant, I think you've got 4 different priorities you have to balance. There's the priority EFC, there's the priority model, there's the renewal priority, there's the priority deadline, and there will soon be the top 10% priority once we work through all of that over the coming year. So we know that there's a bunch of different priorities that you juggle. And so that's why the deadline is just that, of similarly situated, because you might have someone that they've met all of these priorities, and then someone who hasn't met any of them, or other things, even though they applied on the same day, someone who met 5 out of 5 priorities takes precedence over someone who met 1 out of 5. priorities. So.
Do you know how we got to January 15th? Do you know this?
There was a FAC committee led by Chris Murr, who studied it for a year-long process and discussed with all, because the first year they changed the FAFSA opening dates. The FAC decided we don't want to do anything this first year because we really don't know what's going to happen. We want to see what's just the natural activity that occurs. And then they looked at it and made the decision that for the second year to move it to the January 15th deadline. And purposely actually had did like a mid-January date to provide a little extra time once people come back, like once high school students come back from the December break. So the counselors would kind of have one last push to be able to try to assist them. But yes, it was this committee that researched and recommended the January 15th date.
And part of me is really torn because March 15th is, what we used to do. I would love to encourage people to do it sooner, right? Given we need them going. So March 1st, maybe. However, I'm also super concerned about, is everything gonna work right? If they open it up on December 31st, are people gonna have problems? And even though that CARDI deadline is really not gonna make a difference for them, when you see a deadline published, sometimes it creates anxiety.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't expect a senior to be able to navigate the 5 different priorities of Texas grants on their own.
So while I'd
Right.
love to move it up, I'm super worried about things not working as they should, so maybe March 15th is.
Well, to my first question, just to make sure, am I accurate that this group feels that it should be delayed? That we shouldn't stay with January 15th?
I would say yes, it's probably not creating anxiety. You've got 2 weeks.
So step one, we agree it needs to be delayed, so there's no question about, yes, the commissioner needs to use this authority. Then it becomes the question of just how much extra time do we want to provide for this? So.
This will be just a one-time thing.
Yes, it would revert to January 15th the next year unless there were exigent circumstances that caused the commissioner. So he can only advance it on an annual cycle. He can't just change the dates. If we wanted to change the date as a whole, then we'd need to go through the rulemaking process, and actually change it in the rule as to what that date would be.
I think that's reasonable. I think March 15th is a reasonable time frame, especially considered we don't know.
Go back to what we used to do.
Yeah. And it's it's comfortable because we've done it before. So.
And I agree with Dee Dee. I'm not sure that it's going to be a smooth transition. At all.
What makes you think that?
So I'm sure they'll have tons of issues rolling it out.
Few bumps along the
Oh,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, I also saw though on your PowerPoint, forecasting funding, I think was one in one of the, for the strategic priorities, so maybe getting our allocations. Was that what that meant, getting allocations earlier?
Oh, going back to
Way back.
the expanded access.
Yeah. Let me see, Dee Dee,
That-
very small, but.
Yeah, the forecasting funding,
forecast.
that was about the information we provide to the legislature.
Okay. Not-
So
Policy.
the allocation piece, we, like with the private institutions, with the public two-year institutions, as well as with the work study program, the rules that have been established through negotiated rulemaking is that we're able to provide both the allocations for both years of the biennium as soon as the General Appropriations Act is passed. So that way folks have, both years and can plan accordingly. We can't go earlier than General Appropriations Act because we don't know what the funding is, until the governor signs. In the negotiating rulemaking, four-year institutions chose not to have that flexibility. They wanted it, tell us each year. And so year one of a biennium, you get it in June, because we have to wait for the Appropriations Act to occur. Year two of the biennium, we're usually able to do it by about March or April. And that's all highly dependent on when the final institution submits a fact. If you all actually met our deadline, we would have allocations to you in January. We would have everything that you needed in January. We continue to run into the problem that institutions are actively ignoring the fact that your financial aid database is due. In February, we still have people who have not certified their financial aid database. So we are beginning to investigate what are the ramifications that we can hold institutions accountable for this, because it's just out of hand at this point. And you can hear the frustration in my voice because we can't do our job. We literally can't do our jobs. We can't create the financial aid report. We can't create allocations. We can't calculate forecasts for the legislature. We can't do all the things that we're supposed to do for you all. So, I mean, in the years I worked, I never heard anyone not submit their FISAP by October 1st. No one misses the FISAP deadline. Half of our institutions miss the FAT deadline. Half.
Every cycle or just?
Every
that cycle?
cycle. Every single year, half of our institutions miss the FAD deadline. We have not had a year in the time I've been here where we had the final certification come in before, I think, like January 31st. Even this place.
Your attention, please. There has been a fire emergency reported in the building. Please evacuate the
So
building.
before you go, I'm just gonna let you know that the recommend, like what I'm gonna do is, we know we need to change the deadline. I will continue to work with the community over the coming months so that by August we finalize that date. So I'll be in touch with more.
Hey, at least you guys are having a fire drill. We had an earthquake drill. Happy June, everybody.
May I have your attention, please? There has been a fire emergency reported in the building. Evacuate the building by-
That's so bad, you know, I also use them.
I caused the
Oh,
fire.
yeah, they're having a fire emergency drill during my meeting.